The first time he said he was useless. I wanted to laugh. The second time, I wanted to shake him. By the 100th time, all I wanted to do was kiss the word straight out of his mouth. Ethan was the kind of guy who could fill a room without even trying. And yet he swore up and down he was invisible. He lived like a ghost in his own apartment. Walls covered in half-finished canvases. Jars of cloudy paint water sitting around like failed experiments. The world called him eccentric. Maybe even lazy. I called him brilliant. He called himself nothing. That summer, New York was a furnace. Air conditioners hummed in every building. Fire escapes burned your palms if you touched them. And the city smelled like hot asphalt and desperation. I was working 12-hour shifts at the marketing firm downtown, wearing suits that trapped heat like cages, while Ethan spent his days barefoot in his loft, painting, erasing, starting over. We met in collegium, the practical one with the plan. Him, the dreamer who never believed in plans. He used to doodle on the edges of his textbooks instead of taking notes. Little sketches of birds or hands or broken clocks. I kept them. I don't think he knows I still have them, folded in a shoebox at the back of my closet. That night, the night everything cracked open, started with me dragging myself up 5 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. His door was unlocked. It always was. I found him sitting on the floor, shirtless, covered in streaks of blue paint that looked like bruises. He wasn't painting. He was just staring at a blank canvas like it had personally betrayed him. "You look like a crime scene," I said, trying to be funny. He didn't laugh. "Do you ever think you're wasting your life?" His voice was so soft, so goddamn tired. I almost dropped the takeout bag in my hand. "Only when I'm with you," I shot back, because if I didn't joke, I'd break. But he wasn't in the mood for jokes. He dragged a hand down his face, leaving a smear of cobalt across his cheekbone. "I can't do this anymore, Alex. None of it means anything. I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough." That was Ethan, always dangling at the edge of some invisible cliff, convinced one wrong step would send him into nothingness. And Mealway's the one reaching out, trying to pull him back. "Ethan," I said, crouching down in front of him, "you're literally covered in paint because you care too much. You're in this because it means everything. Stop telling yourself it doesn't." His eyes flicked up to mine, stormy gray, glassy with exhaustion. And for one reckless heartbeat, I wanted to kiss him right there, paint and all. But I didn't. Couldn't. He was my best friend. My only constant in a city that ate people alive. Instead, I shoved the takeout box into his hands. "Eat before you starve to death. Picasso." He cracked the smallest smile, like maybe I had pulled him back from the edge again. But something in his gaze lingered, a weight I couldn't name. The truth was, I'd been in love with Ethan for years. The kind of love that gnawed at you quietly, like termites inside wood, leaving you hollow but still standing. I had dated women, men, anyone who wasn't him, because the thought of ruining us terrified me more than loneliness ever could. But that summer was different. That summer, the cracks in Ethan's armor widened. His insecurities weren't just late-night confessions anymore. They spilled out in daylight, staining everything. He talked about quitting painting, about moving back to his parents' house in Vermont, about giving up. And every time he said it, something inside me broke. One evening, I came by to find him sitting on the roof, legs dangling over the ledge, cigarette glowing between his fingers. The sky was a smear of orange and purple, the city buzzing below. "Ethan, Jesus," I snapped. "Get down from there before you kill yourself." He smirked, lazy, like the heat had melted away his fear. "Relax. I'm not gonna jump." "Not funny," I muttered, climbing up beside him anyway. My chest was tight, my throat dry. I wanted to scream at him for being reckless. Instead, I sat down, so close our knees brushed. He exhaled smoke into the air, watching it disappear. Sometimes I think it'd be easier if I did, though. That was the moment I nearly lost it. My hand shot out, grabbing his wrist so hard the cigarette tumbled down 5 stories. Don't you dare. Don't you ever say that to me again. His eyes widened at the force in my voice. For once, he looked startled, like maybe he hadn't realized how much he meant to me. You think you're useless? I hissed. You think you're nothing. You're everything, Ethan. You're the only thing that makes this goddamn city bearable. The silence between us stretched, thick, unbearable, and then his hand slipped into mine. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was desperate, trembling, a lifeline. But my heart was hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. He didn't let go. I didn't want him to. His hand stayed in mine long after the sky had burned itself out and the city lights took over. I kept waiting for him to pull away, to make some joke that would undo the rawness of the moment. But he didn't. He just sat there. His fingers curled around mine like he'd been holding on all his life and only just realized it. You don't have to keep saving me, he whispered eventually, his voice hoarse. I tightened my grip. Maybe I want to. He let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh, wasn't quite a sob. You'll get tired of it. Everyone does. I turned toward him, the neon glow from a nearby billboard cutting across his cheekbones, highlighting the paint stains still smudged against his skin. I'm not everyone. For a second, the whole world stilled. Just his eyes on mine, heavy and searching. Something unspoken passed between us, a question I was too afraid to answer. And then he looked away, shoulders hunched, retreating into himself like he always did. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there until the night grew cold, our hands still locked together. When we finally went back inside, he didn't let go until he had to close the door. The next few weeks blurred into a pattern. Me showing up after work. Him pretending he wasn't waiting for me. Both of us orbiting each other like 2 planets destined to collide but too stubborn to admit it. Sometimes, I'd find him asleep on the floor with brushes scattered around him, exhaustion painted across his face. Sometimes, he'd drag me into his process, shoving a half-finished canvas at me and demanding, "What's wrong with it? Tell me the truth." And I'd tell him, always gently, always reminding him he wasn't broken, even when he didn't believe me. One night, after too much whiskey and not enough food, he pressed a paintbrush into my hand and said, "Go ahead. Ruin it." "I don't know how to paint," I said, laughing nervously. "That's the point. No rules. No pressure. Just ruin it." So I made a mess of the canvas, streaks of green cutting across his delicate lines. He watched me with something I couldn't place amusement, maybe, or something deeper. Then he took the brush back and painted over my mistakes, weaving them into something unexpectedly beautiful. "That's what art is," he murmured, taking something broken and making it matter. His words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because I wondered if he realized that was exactly what he was to me, broken and beautiful. More than he'd ever admit. But the fragile balance we had didn't last. It never does. It was a Friday when I came by after work to find his loft in chaos. Canvases slashed open. Paint splattered on the walls like blood. He was sitting on the floor again, this time with his head buried in his hands. "Ethan," I gasped, dropping my bag. "What the hell happened?" He looked up, and his eyes were wild. "I can't do it. Alex. Can't. I'm a fraud. No one wants this. No one wants me." I knelt beside him, grabbing his shoulders. Stop saying that. Stop destroying yourself. He shoved me back, harder than I expected. Why do you care so much? Why can't you just let me be nothing? The words tore through me, sharper than any knife. I stared at him, breathless, my chest caving in. Because you're not nothing to me. The silence that followed was unbearable. His chest rose and fell. His fists clenched. His face twisted in pain. And then, before I could think, before I could stop myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't careful. It was messy and furious. Years of repressed feelings exploding all at once. He froze for a heartbeat, then kissed me back with equal desperation. Paint-smeared hands clutching at my shirt, pulling me closer as if he wanted to crawl inside my skin. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing like we'd just surfaced from drowning, his eyes searched mine, frantic and terrified. Why did you do that? Because I had to. I whispered. Because I can't keep pretending I don't love you. His breath hitched. His grip loosened. Alex, his voice cracked, breaking me more than his words ever could. Don't say that. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. My hands trembled as I reached for him again, brushing my thumb against the blue streak on his jaw. I've been in love with you for years, Ethan. You think you're useless, but you're not. You're the most important thing in my life. He flinched like the words burned him. For a moment, I thought he'd finally let himself believe it. But then he pulled away, shaking his head violently. No, you're wrong. I'll ruin you. I ruin everything. And just like that, he shut down, locked himself behind walls I couldn't climb. The days after that were unbearable. He avoided me, wouldn't answer my calls, wouldn't open the door when I knocked. I stood outside his loft once for 2 hours, my voice raw from yelling, begging him just to talk to me. Nothing. At work, I couldn't focus. My boss barked at me for missing deadlines. My coworkers whispered about how distracted I'd become. I didn't care. None of it mattered without him. Finally, after a week of silence, I came home to find him sitting on my apartment steps, rain soaking his clothes, his eyes hollow. I didn't know where else to go, he said, voice shaking. I pulled him inside without a word, wrapped him in blankets, made him tea. He didn't resist. He just sat there on my couch, shivering, staring at the floor. I'm sorry, he whispered eventually, for everything. Don't be sorry, I said, my throat thick. Just let me be here, please. He looked up then, and for the first time, I saw something crack in his gaze. Not just pain, but longing, as if he wanted to believe me but didn't know how. I don't deserve you, he muttered. You don't get to decide that, I said, firmer than I felt. You don't get to decide what you mean to me. For the first time, he didn't argue. He just leaned into me, his head against my shoulder, and for hours we sat there in silence, the city roaring outside, the storm raging on. And in that silence, I knew one thing for certain, no matter how much he tried to push me away. I wasn't going anywhere. But love, I was starting to realize, wasn't just about holding on. Sometimes it was about surviving the storm together even when one of you was determined to drown. Because the storm wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The storm inside Ethan didn't fade just because he was in my apartment. If anything, it grew louder, pressing at the edges of everything we shared. For the first few days, he barely spoke. He drifted from couch to window to kitchen, staring out at the city like it was some giant, merciless painting he couldn't fix. He didn't pick up a brush. He didn't even touch his sketchbook. It was as if the part of him that had always burned so fiercely had gone out. And too was terrified. I brought him food he wouldn't eat, made coffee he let go cold, turned on movies that played to empty air. At night, I heard him shifting restlessly on the couch, caught between sleep and waking, as though his demons had followed him even into my living room. On the fourth night, I woke to find him standing on my balcony in the dark, shirtless, the city lights painting his skin gold and shadow. "Ethan," I whispered, sliding the door open. The chill in the air made me shiver. "What are you doing out here?" He didn't turn. "I don't belong here, Alex." My throat tightened. "You mean here, in my place?" He shook his head slowly, eyes fixed on the skyline. "No. Here. In this city. In this life. I keep waiting for something to click. For me to feel like I matter. But all I see is proof that I don't." I stepped closer, my chest burning. "That's not true. You matterto me. More than anyone." Finally, he looked at me, eyes glassy, haunted. "Then why does it feel like I'm killing you too?" The words gutted me, because he wasn't wrong. His pain had become mine, his despair a weight on my chest every single day. But it wasn't a burden I wanted to escape. It was one I wanted to carry, because it meant carrying him. I closed the space between us, gripping his shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not killing me. You're the reason I'm still standing. You're the reason I believe there's more to life than the grind. More than work and deadlines and meaningless shit. You're the reason." His lips parted like he wanted to argue, but no sound came. He just stared at me, searching, shaking under my touch. And in that silence, I made a choice. I leaned forward and kissed him again. This time, it wasn't fury or desperation. It was steady, deliberate, aching with all the love I'd buried for years. His breath caught, and for a moment I thought he would push me away again. But then he kissed me back, slow and trembling, his hands finding their way into my hair like he'd been starving for this as long as I had. When we broke apart, his forehead pressed against mine. He whispered, "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I admitted. "But I want to learn with you." His eyes closed, lashes wet, and though fear still clung to him, something inside him softened, as if for once he was willing to let himself be held. We didn't fall into romance the way movies promised. There were no perfect montages, no instant happily ever after. What we had was messy, full of jagged edges. He stayed with me for weeks. Sometimes he'd reach for my hand without realizing it, holding on like he needed proof I was real. Other times, he'd retreat into himself, pacing the apartment, refusing to be touched. At work, I was a disaster. My boss called me into her office, her lips pressed tight. "You're distracted, Alex. If this keeps up, you'll lose more than a promotion." I nodded, lied through my teeth, told her I'd get it together. But the truth was, I didn't care about campaigns or clients anymore. The only campaign that mattered was convincing Ethan he was worth something. One night, I came home to find him finally holding a brush again. He was painting on one of my walls, streaks of color spreading across the plain white surface. "What are you doing?" I asked, startled. He didn't look up. "Your place was too clean, too perfect. It needed something broken." I watched him, heart swelling. His strokes were rough, almost violent, but there was life in them. He was alive. When he finally stepped back, I saw what he'd made a mess of colors that didn't form any clear shape. But somehow, in its chaos, felt like us. "I don't know what it is," he muttered. I stepped closer, my shoulder brushing his. "It's beautiful." He glanced at me then, lips quirking. You're biased. Damn right I am. And for the first time in weeks, he laughed. A real laugh. Small but warm. Like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I wanted to bottle the sound and keep it forever. But the storm wasn't done testing us. A month later, Ethan got a call from a gallery he'd applied to years ago. They wanted to feature his work in a group show. I expected him to be thrilled. Instead, he spiraled. I can't, he said, pacing the apartment like a caged animal. They'll see through me. They'll realize I'm a fraud. Ethan, no, you don't get it. If I put myself out there, if they reject might'll prove everything I've ever feared. I grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. Or it'll prove you're wrong. That you're brilliant. That you deserve this. His eyes darted over my face. Panicked. What if I can't handle it? Then I'll be there, I said fiercely. Every step. You don't have to do this alone. He swallowed hard, chest heaving. And in that moment, I saw it war inside him. The tug between fear and hope. Finally, he nodded. Just once. Okay. The weeks leading up to the show were chaos. Ethan worked nonstop, painting until his hands cramped, cursing at canvases, starting over again and again. I watched him unravel and rebuild himself each day, caught between awe and heartbreak. At night, he'd collapse beside me in bed, too tired to protest when I wrapped an arm around him. Sometimes he'd whisper things in the dark. Half-asleep confessions he never voiced in daylight. I don't deserve you. I'm scared I'll lose you. I don't know how to be enough. And every time, I whispered back, you already are. I don't know if he believed me, but he let me hold him anyway. The night of the gallery show, he was pale, trembling, convinced he was about to humiliate himself. I can't walk in there, he muttered outside the entrance, gripping my hand like a lifeline. I can't. I cupped his face, forcing him to meet my eyes. Ethan, look at me. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. That's enough. His breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought he might bolt. But then, slowly, he nodded. We walked in together. And I swear, I've never been prouder in my life. Inside, his paintings hung under bright lights, colors blazing against the stark white walls. People clustered around, murmuring, pointing, admiring. Ethan stood frozen beside me, disbelief etched across his face. They like it. They love it, I said, smiling through tears I hadn't realized I was holding back. He turned to me then, his expression raw, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. Maybe you were right. I usually am, I teased, brushing my thumb over his knuckles. For the first time, he let himself smile without hesitation. And in that moment, with the whole room buzzing around us, I knew we were going to be okay. But I also knew the hardest part wasn't over. Because loving someone like Ethan meant facing his darkness again and again. It meant choosing him even when he couldn't choose himself. And the truth was, I wasn't sure how many storms we still had ahead. But I did know this. I wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. For weeks after the gallery show, Ethan floated between disbelief and cautious wonder. He tried to pretend it hadn't mattered, brushing it off like some fluke. But I saw the way his eyes softened when strangers praised his work. The way he lingered near his canvases as though finally recognizing a piece of himself worth keeping. That night, when we got home, I found him sitting on the edge of my bed, his hands shaking. What if I lose this? He whispered. I sat beside him, close enough for our shoulders to touch. Then we'll start again, and again, and again. As many times as it takes. He looked at me then, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. And before I could process it, he leaned in, kissed me with a tenderness so different from the desperation before. It was slow, searching, almost reverent. When we pulled back, his forehead pressed to mine. He murmured, "You scare me, Alex." "Why?" "Because you make me want to believe in things I swore I couldn't." My chest ached, but I only whispered, "Then believe in me." Our relationship became a fragile rhythm after that. Some days were light coffee in bed, paint smudges on my skin from where he'd pulled me too close, laughter echoing in my apartment like we'd carved out our own universe. Other days, the darkness crept back in. He'd spiral into silence, retreat to the balcony for hours, chain smoking while I sat helpless inside. Those were the nights I learned love wasn't always warm. Sometimes it was holding someone through the cold until morning. My friends noticed the change in me. At a dinner party, one of them, Rachel, sharp-tongued and unfiltered, cornered me in the kitchen. "So, you and the painter," she said, arching a brow. I froze. "What about him?" "You're different," she said bluntly. "You used to be all spreadsheets and deadlines. Now you look like you haven't slept in weeks. But there's this light in you. It's him, isn't it?" I didn't know what to say, so I told the truth. "Yeah, it's him." Her expression softened. "Then hold on to it, even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy." I carried her words home with me, tucked them away like armor. But armor only does so much. One night, I came home to find Ethan gone. His things still scattered across the apartment. But no note, no text, nothing. Panic clawed at me as hours passed with no word. I called his phone again and again until finally, near dawn, he answered. "Ethan, where are you?" My voice shook. Silence. Then, "I'm at the studio." I found him there, slumped on the floor, bottles scattered around him, eyes bloodshot. Canvases leaned against the walls unfinished, frantic strokes that looked more like wounds than art. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, dropping to my knees beside him. He laughed bitterly, trying to prove I'm not a mistake. My chest tightened. I grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. "You are not a mistake. You're human. You're allowed to break. But don't you dare tell me you're worthless." His gaze wavered, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Why do you keep fighting for me?" The answer tore out of me, raw and unplanned. "Because I love you, and I refuse to watch you destroy yourself." He stared at me like I'd handed him something dangerous. Then, slowly, his hand came up, curling over mine. "I don't know if I can be who you need me to be." "You already are," I whispered. "You just don't see it yet." It wasn't easy after that. We stumbled, argued, made mistakes. But something shifted. He started painting more. Not just in bursts of despair but with intention. Focus. Sometimes he even smiled while he worked. One morning, I woke to find him sketching me as I slept. I blinked groggily, embarrassed. "What are you doing?" He smirked, capturing my muse. I groaned. "That's cheesy as hell." "Yeah, but it's true," he said softly, and my heart nearly gave out. The second gallery show came faster than either of us expected. This time, Ethan didn't argue when I insisted on coming with him. He stood taller that night, less afraid, though his hand never left mine. His paintings drew crowds, and critics scribbled notes, nodding appreciatively. I watched pride bloom on his face in real time, watched him begin to believe. Afterward, as we walked home, he pulled me into an alley. kissed me hard, breathless, like gratitude and relief and love all tangled together. I think, he whispered against my lips, I might actually want to live. Tears blurred my vision. Good, because I can't imagine this world without you. But happiness is fragile. It never stays unchallenged. One night, months later, his father showed up unannounced. The tall, stern man with the same stormy eyes as Ethan but none of the softness. You've been wasting your life. His father spat in my living room. Hiding behind this art nonsense. Dragging other people down with you. I felt Ethan flinch beside me. Rage flared in my chest. He's not wasting anything. He's building something beautiful. His father sneered at me. And who are you? Some savior. Don't fool yourself. You'll tire of him, just like everyone else. The words hung heavy in the room. Poison aimed at Ethan's deepest wound. I saw him shrink, shoulders curling inward, and my heart cracked. I stepped forward, voice steady. No, I won't, because I love him, and nothing you say will change that. His father's face hardened, but I didn't care. I turned to Ethan, cupped his face, and kissed him right there, daring the world to watch. When we pulled back, Ethan's eyes were wet, his lips trembling. For once, though, he didn't retreat. He whispered, You mean it? With everything I have. I swore. And in that moment, I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. Together. Of course, life didn't magically smooth out after that. There were still nights of silence. Still mornings when he doubted everything. But there was also laughter. Warmth. Stolen kisses in grocery store aisles. Lazy Sundays tangled in sheets. We weren't perfect. We weren't even close. But we were real. And sometimes, that's enough. The weeks after Ethan's father stormed into my apartment were like walking a tightrope. Ethan tried to shrug it off. Pretended the confrontation hadn't rattled him. But I saw the shadows creep back into his eyes. Words like those don't just disappear. They sink in, dig deep, fester. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night and find him sitting upright in bed, staring into the dark, chest rising and falling like he'd just run a marathon. Nightmare. I'd whisper. He'd nod, then curl into me without a word. His silence hurt more than his screams ever could. I wanted to fix it. God. I wanted to make him believe in himself as much as I believed in him. But the truth was, I couldn't fight every battle for him. Some of them, he'd have to face alone. The chance came sooner than either of us expected. A major gallery in Manhattan reached out, offering Ethan a solo show. His first. The kind of opportunity artists dream about. The kind that could launch him for real. When I read the email aloud, my chest buzzed with excitement. This is it, Ethan. This is everything you've been working toward. But he just stared at the floor, pale, lips pressed tight. I can't. My heart sank. What do you mean? You can't. I'm not ready. I'll never be ready. A solo show means all eyes on me, Alex. And when they see me for what I am, his voice cracked. They'll walk away. I stepped closer, gripping his hands. No, Ethan. They'll finally see you the way I do. And they won't walk away. They'll stay. But nothing I said could shake his fear. The weeks leading up to the show were brutal. He worked himself to exhaustion, slashing canvases when they didn't come out right, snapping at me when I tried to intervene. There were nights he disappeared into the studio and didn't come back until dawn, reeking of cigarettes and turpentine. I stood by him, even when it hurt. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't wear me down. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand he stop tearing himself apart. Instead, I just held him when he finally collapsed, whispering truths he wasn't ready to hear. I love you. You're enough. You're not alone. The night of the solo show arrived with a cold snap that bit through my coat. Ethan paced outside the gallery, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. I can't go in, he muttered. I can't breathe. I grabbed his face, forced him to look at me. Ethan, you've survived every storm that's come for you. This one you don't have to face alone. I'm right here. His eyes were wild, terrified. But then, slowly, he nodded. We walked in together. The gallery was packed. Spotlights gleamed on Ethan's paintings, a mix of chaos and beauty that felt like stepping inside his soul. People whispered, pointed, smiled. I watched Ethan freeze, his breath caught, panic threatening to swallow him whole. I squeezed his hand until he looked at me. They love it, I whispered. They love you. And for the first time, I saw it shift. His shoulders lifted, his chest expanded, and a spark lit behind his eyes. Not full confidence. Not yet. But something close. Something like hope. That night, after the show, we stumbled back to my apartment, drunk on champagne and adrenaline. Ethan collapsed onto my couch, laughing breathlessly. I did it, he whispered, like he couldn't believe the words. I actually did it. I sat beside him, heart swelling. I told you, you're perfect. He turned to me then, I soft, voice trembling. Not perfect, just mine. Before I could reply, he kissed me, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that said more than words ever could. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. I love you, I said again, certain, unafraid. This time, he whispered it back. I love you too. And just like that, the years of silence between us shattered. But love doesn't cure everything. It doesn't erase the past, doesn't silence every demon. There were still nights Ethan doubted himself, still days he slipped into shadows. But now, he let me in. He let me hold the weight with him instead of carrying it alone. We built something fragile, messy, real. Mornings filled with coffee and quiet kisses. Afternoons where I worked while he painted. Evenings spent tangled on the couch. And for the first time in a long time, I believed in forever. One Sunday, as sunlight poured through the window, Ethan set down his brush and looked at me. You know what's funny? What? I asked, glancing up from my laptop. I used to think I was useless, that I'd never be enough. But you make me want to believe I'm worth it. I smiled, throat tight. You don't need me to prove that, Ethan. You already are. He stepped closer, paint on his hands, love in his eyes. Maybe, but I'll never stop being grateful you saw me before I did. And when he kissed me then, soft and certain, I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living, together. Yet, in the back of my mind, I knew storms always return. And when they did, we'd face them. Because love wasn't about perfection. It was about staying, even when the sky fell apart. And I wasn't going anywhere. The weeks after Ethan's solo show felt like breathing new air. His phone buzzed nonstop with offers, interviews, invitations. Critics praised his work as raw, transcendent, unforgettable. I watched him glow in ways I'd never seen before, like the world had finally caught up to what I always knew. But with recognition came pressure. And pressure, for Ethan, was a dangerous thing. He started second-guessing every brushstroke, every word he said in interviews. The old voices crept back. You're a fraud. You don't deserve this. One mistake and it's all gone. I tried to remind him of the truth. But there were nights he slipped away into himself, unreachable, and I had to wait in silence until he returned. Loving Ethan meant accepting that sometimes all I could do was hold space until he was ready to be held. And then, like some cruel twist, the storm we thought we'd escaped came roaring back. It was his father again. He showed up at the gallery during Ethan's second exhibit. Uninvited, face tight with disapproval. I saw Ethan freeze when he spotted him across the room, glass nearly slipping from his hand. The man didn't congratulate his son, didn't acknowledge the glowing reviews, the sold pieces. He just said, coldly, "So this is what you're wasting your life on?" I felt Ethan shrink beside me, like a boy again. That was it. I stepped forward, my voice steady, sharp. He's not wasting anything. He's creating something extraordinary. And whether you see it or not doesn't change the truth. The gallery fell silent. Ethan's father glared at me, then at his son, before leaving without another word. When the door shut, Ethan's shoulders crumpled. He bolted out the back, into the freezing night. I chased after him. We ended up on the bridge, the river below glinting with city lights. Ethan leaned on the railing, shivering, eyes full of anguish. Why do I keep letting him do this to me? His voice cracked. Why can't I just let go? I stepped closer, careful, like approaching something fragile. Because he's your father, and a part of you still wants him to see you, to love you the way you deserve. Tears streamed down his face. But he never will, Alex. No matter what I do, it's never enough. I touched his shoulder, then turned him toward me. It is enough. You are enough. He just doesn't know how to see it. That's his failure, not yours. He collapsed into me then, sobbing, trembling like his body was trying to purge years of pain. I held him tighter, whispering over and over, "You're not alone. Not anymore. Not ever again." After that night, something shifted. Ethan stopped chasing his father's approval. He poured everything into his art instead. Not for recognition, not for revenge, but for himself. And for the first time, I saw him paint joy, colors brighter, lines freer, canvases breathing with light. It was as though letting go of that impossible weight finally gave him space to fly. Months passed. We built our life like a patchwork quilt, imperfect but warm. There were still nights when the darkness returned. But now Ethan reached for my hand instead of pushing me away. One evening, after a long day, we sat on the floor of his studio, empty takeout boxes scattered around, canvases leaning against the walls. The room smelled of paint and sesame noodles. He leaned against me, quiet for a long time, then said softly, "Do you ever think about forever?" My heart skipped. All the time. He tilted his head, I searching mine. "And what does it look like to you?" I smiled. "You. Paint on your hands. Coffee in the mornings. Fighting over which movie to watch. Waking up and knowing we'll survive whatever comes." His throat bobbed, his gaze shimmering. "That sounds like home." "It is." He kissed me then, slow and certain, and I knew we had already built it. The years ahead weren't perfect. No life ever is. But they were ours. There were fights about little things, laundry, dishes. Whether pineapple belonged on pizza, it didn't. For the record, there were harder days too, when Ethan's doubts resurfaced or I felt the strain of carrying more than I should. But there was also laughter that filled every corner of our home, and love that wove itself into the ordinary. A love that stayed, that chose, that healed. Ethan's art flourished. He became known for capturing raw emotion, for painting not just images but truths. People traveled across states to see his work. And every time someone praised him, I watched him stand taller, a little more certain. And every time, when the noise faded, he'd turn to me and whisper, "Still think I'm perfect?" And I'd smile, kiss the paint off his cheek, and answer, "Always." Years later, on a quiet spring morning, I woke to find him painting in the sunlight, hair messy, shirt smudged with color. He looked up. I soughed. And for a moment I was struck all over again by how far we'd come. He wasn't the broken boy who once believed he was useless. He was a man who had fought for himself, who had chosen to keep living, keep creating, keep loving. And God, I was so damn proud of him. I walked over, slid my arms around his waist from behind, kissed the curve of his neck. He laughed, setting down the brush. "What are you doing?" Reminding myself I'm the luckiest person alive. He turned in my arms, forehead against mine. "Funny. I was just thinking the same thing." And as we stood there, sunlight bathing us, I realized this was the ending I'd always hoped for. Not a fairy tale, not perfection, but something better, something real. Because my best friend had once believed he was useless. But in my eyes and now, finally, in his own was nothing short of perfect. And that was enough. That was everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.